Let's talk about a fancy new Space Marine captain and some model support for one of the lesser known chapters in the game. Here we have Captain Vitrian Messinius of the White Consuls. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking about another shiny new Space Marine model reveal, this one coming from the Black Library previews over the weekend. The Black Library model releases kind of run a bit parallel to the rest of the 40k ones. It seems that Games Workshop perhaps gives them a budget to decide exactly which miniatures are going to get a new model each year, and they pick a suitable recipient miniature out of one of their books. So far we've had models for Gaunt's Ghosts, Inquisitor Eisenhorn, and Valerian Andalea, and a few more. I'm sure a lot of people's initial reaction is probably going to be, yes, it's yet another Space Marine captain with some fancy gear, and I'm sure there'll be a fair amount of usual cynicism from all the factions that haven't had an HQ choice released in a good while, where the Space Marines are getting Primaris Captain number 10 or more. I guess in terms of the Black Library miniatures, they haven't actually done that many Space Marines. The only other Space Marine character that I remember them making was Uriel Ventris, at least in terms of current 40k. I guess there are a whole bunch of characters that have had their miniatures realised in terms of the Horus Heresy books. In any case, as for who this is, it's Captain Vitrian Messinius. He's captain of the White Consuls chapter, which is an Ultramarine successor chapter from the distant past in 40k. It's not one of those new fancy Primaris chapters that they came out with 8th edition and things. They're very much a long-standing part of 40k lore, usually quite in the background. The purpose of the chapter originally was to guard the Eye of Terror and Cadian Gate. Obviously we know how that ended. But they do have some pretty interesting lore. Rather than having just one chapter master, they have two, one of which is basically on permanent Cadian Gate guard duty on their homeworld of Sabatine, ready with a large portion of the chapter's strength at all times to respond to emerging threats of chaos through the Cadian Gate. The other chapter master commands the crusading forces of the chapter, striking war zones further afield and lending their support across the galaxy. During the events of the fall of Cadia and the Indomitus era, the chapter's homeworld Sabatine was overrun, the forces of Chaos taking their fortress monastery, and now the Death Guard are using the world as a staging post. A lot of the chapter was wiped out at this point, and the surviving White Consuls are more on a company level as opposed to a chapter level, at least according to the Warhammer community presenters. This chap, Captain Vitrian Messinius, wasn't on the homeworld at the time of the fall apparently. He was off helping defend Ultramar at the time when Rabute Gilliman returned to life, restored by the Eldar. Following that, he basically gathered together the forces of Ultramar to crusade towards Terra and rescue it from Abaddon the Despoiler, beating them back and saving the throne world, Captain Messinius along for the ride. Then, following that and his actions during the retaking of Terra, he was then granted a commanding role within the later Indomitus Crusade to beat back the forces of Chaos from the Great Rift, and given this fancy golden Auramite power fist as a symbol of office. It's basically been one of the central characters from Games Workshop's Dawn of Fire series, which is why they're realising him as his own miniature. Some pretty cool lore there, I think, both for the chapter and the man himself, but let's talk about the model. It looks like he does have the option of both a Primaris style helm with a wreath coronet type thing or a bare head. I must admit I've seen a fair few people commenting that he's got a pretty interesting choice of hairdo. He very much seems to be trying to embrace Space Marines as the knightly warrior monk type vibe. The power fist does look pretty cool. The Auramite on it has a nice lancer and they've painted the word terror on it. All very snazzy, and it's got a rather modern looking plasma pistol with a cool wing design underneath it. It's got a tilt plate with a number 3 on it. I guess that might be Indomitus Crusade Battle Group Tertius, perhaps. And it's got the White Consuls chapter symbol, which looks basically like an eagle. Given Imperium, I don't think that's necessarily the worst if you did want to paint him up in the colours of another chapter. Eagles are pretty universal where the Imperium is concerned. I think it's perhaps interesting as to whether or not this guy's going to be a permanent addition to the range. It's been a little bit variable on the Black Library miniature side of things. A bunch of units have got their own datasheets, such as Valerian and Alea for the Custodes, Eisenhorn out of the Inquisitors, Gaunt's Ghosts for the Guard, and the recent Uriel Ventris, but not all of them have. Say for example Severina Rain did have a datasheet, but then she basically disappeared from the model range. I guess it's not 100% impossible that this guy could be a temporary release and then doesn't get carried on into the future. Rules-wise, I guess you'd always just be able to field him as a standard Primaris Space Marine captain. At the moment their war gear selections are really annoyingly restrictive to specific models that Games Workshop sell, but it does look like Plasma Pistol and Power Fist is one of the legal ones. Perhaps for that reason it's maybe not as necessary that he gets a new datasheet all of his own. Though I suppose if he did, it might not be entirely impossible that he might come under the remit of the Ultramarine supplement if those books really do get redone in the early months of next year. I think if I had to guess, I would guess that he might get some sort of digital datasheet download, as they did for Uriel Ventris. They probably could have got away with Uriel Ventris just having a stock captain set of rules as well. For him, I think that they issued a downloadable datasheet, and he had a few extra special rules, such as being able to use the adaptive strategy stratagem for just 1 CP, and also making his sword just that little bit better at a big damage 3 rather than just flat damage 2 like normal mastercrafted power swords. I guess if this guy did get a similar treatment, at least datasheet wise, they'd probably give him some extra buffing rule to represent him leading his troops in his own specific way, and I can't help but think that that Auramite Power Fist is going to have some boosted stats. Maybe it could be something like a damage 3 Power Fist, which will be kind of interesting for a Space Marine captain on foot. The Primaris captain can't take Thunderhammers at the moment. It'd also be kind of cool if they gave him some sort of rules for maybe operating independently of the White Consuls. If he did just have the successor chapter type rules, then it might mean that he'd be a bit restrictive, and he might not want to field his rules if he were, say, running a different chapter. Would be kind of fun if you might just be able to slot him into other chapters' lineups as well, perhaps to represent him leading different parts of the Indomitus Crusade. Not entirely sure how likely that is though. It might not necessarily be the best thing if he suddenly becomes a great character who is an auto-include in loads of lists. This one was the only miniature reveal from Black Library this year, but if you're into your 40k literature, there are a few other interesting previews for different books that they showed off. They're continuing their Dawn of Fire series with a book called The Iron Kingdom, mainly focused on tensions between a night world and the Indomitus Crusaders. They're continuing in the Siege of Terror book series with one called End and Death. A pretty interesting point narratively, as they're just about to cover some of the biggest bits in all of 40k's history, with the Sanguinius and Emperor versus Horus showdown on the flagship. Otherwise, I think a couple of ones that could have some juicy lore details for 40k are covering Cypher Lord of the Fallen and Creed Ashes of Cadia. Cypher's always been a fun mystery, and any further light shed on his whole agenda would be really quite good fun. A renewed focus on Cypher might well be in line with something like a return of Lionel Johnson waking up on the Rock in 10th edition. We do definitely feel like we're overdue another Loyalist Primarch coming back at some stage. I feel like the Creed Ashes of Cadia book could be quite interesting. Apparently this one follows new Creed as she returns to the fallen world of Cadia in search of her father's battle plans. Kind of interesting to have a bit more details as to a character that we don't really know all that much about yet. In any case though, let me know what you think of Mr. White Consuls here. Do you think that the miniature's a good one? Would you be tempted to pick him up as a stand-in for a Space Marine captain? And how likely do you think he is to stick around as a permanent part of the range, or get his own datasheet? Look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where we'll certainly keep the regular 40k things coming. I do tend to post new videos just about every day, and I will try and keep up with Games Workshop's news and releases. Finally, if you've been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that links down in the video description below. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.